Good morning. This is Pastor Allen, and I'd like to wish each and every one a happy Father's Day. This morning, our scripture reading will come from Ephesians chapter 6, verse number 1 through verse number 4. Ephesians chapter 6, verse number 1 through verse number 4. It says, "Children, obey your parents in the Lord, for this is right. Honor your father and your mother, which is the first commandment, with promise, that it may be well with you and you may live long or a rich, full life on earth. And you fathers, provoke not your children to wrath, but bring them up in the nurture and the admonition of the Lord." This morning I'd like to talk about fathers for just a little while. There's three thoughts, very short thoughts, that I want to share with you. First of all, I want to look at the celebration of fatherhood. I want to look at the change in fatherhood. And then I'd like to give you a challenge in fatherhood. First of all, the celebration. Do you know that Father's Day has been celebrated, especially in Europe, for several centuries? Here in America, the first celebration was in 1910. So that means that this year is the 120th consecutive anniversary of Father's Day in America. I look and I see the change. Like so much of our culture, fatherhood in the United States is under a state of change. And it has been for several decades. I grew up in the 50s, the 60s, and the 70s. And I'd like to remember some of the television programs that were on during that period of time, and then look at the change that we see in television and the movies today. In the 1950s, you remember a program called Ozzie and Harriet? Remember a program called Father Knows Best? Remember a program, Eddie's Father, or My Three Sons? In all of those television programs, fathers were presented as wise, loving, compassionate. They were presented as men who gave wise counsel and leadership to their families. My, hadn't things changed now? Today, we look at our television program, you look at the movies that presents fatherhood, and what do you see? Most of the time, you see them present a father as some sort of doofus, some sort of, I hate to use the word idiot, but a person who just doesn't know what's going on. They really don't have a clue about what life is about. If they don't present fatherhood in that manner, then they present fatherhood as a father who is a hypocrite. Very stern, very unloving, very religious, but very hypocritical. I know that I thought about a father on television that was a single parent, which was really unusual during the 60s, and it was played by an actor called Chuck Connors, and Chuck Connor played in The Rifleman. And if you'll remember, he was raising a son, and his wife had died. And in that program, he was always encouraging his son to live a life of integrity, a life of honesty, a life of hard work. And I think that is the things that we need to do now. Now, folks, I know that there's no perfect fathers. I know that I was not a perfect father. I'm not a perfect grandfather. But I do believe that the majority of fathers today have a real desire to raise their children in a loving environment. They want to raise their children to become adult men and women who can make wise decisions about life. And they really care and are concerned about the kids. Oh yeah, there's failures. We'll talk just briefly about that in a moment. I'm very impressed with the neighborhood in which I live. Almost all the houses around us are young families. And I observe these young fathers. And they're really active with their children. They're involved with their children. They spend time with the kids. They communicate with the children. Quite often, late in the afternoon, on pretty days, you'll see the fathers and the mothers, and they're walking with the children up and down the street. They're doing more than exercising. They're building memories and building lives. I know that the fathers that I know, young men who have small children or teenage children, they're much involved in the lives of those kids. And they want to raise those children in the fear, as the book of Ephesians said, and the admonition of the Lord. I do see some negative aspects of it. We went out to a restaurant just a few days ago, and a family came in. It was a mom and a dad and a child. And I call it a child. It was a young person, and they were probably in 12, 13 years of age. After they sat down and after they made their order, out came the phones. And every single one of them had their phone out. And all during our meal, I couldn't help but glance over and look at them. I never saw them make really eye contact. I never saw them carry on a conversation. All I saw them do until they finally got up and left was use their cell phone. What a terrible waste of an opportunity to invest in the life of that family. I mean, they could have asked a number of questions about this young person. They could have talked about things that were going on in their lives. You know, probably by this time, just a few days later, what they were doing on their phone, whether they were on Facebook, whether they were playing games, whatever they were doing, probably that's all gone. They don't even remember what they were doing. But if they had invested their lives in one another, they would have built memories that would have gone a lifetime with them. I look and I see the challenge. I see there's a great challenge for fathers to be active and involved in the life of their kids. You know, I think about grandparents. And so often, you know, grandparents, you'll come up and grandparents say, oh, you'll see my grandkids? And those of you that don't have grandchildren, you say, well, not really, I really don't, you know. But those that do, you say, yeah, I'd like to see those. And I think grandparents love those grandchildren so much. You know, you probably heard those saying, if I'd known my grandkids were going to be this good, I'd have had them first. But I think we realize the priorities in life. And we realize that what we really thought was so important when we were young is not nearly as important as what we thought they were. Now, I know there's bills to pay. I know there's careers to build. I know there's things to do. But when we let these things take priority over our children, we're making a very tragic mistake in our life. And I'd like to challenge each and every one of you that are fathers this morning. Spend those time with those kids. You know, I hear people say, well, quality time is important. And you know, it really is. I don't have time this morning on this program to be able to go in depth on that. But I think quantity of time is also important. I think both of those things are important. And a child needs to know that dad and mom love them very, very much. There's a very famous song that I remember called The Cat's in the Cradle. I'm not going to read it to you. I wrote down the lyrics, but what I want to do is share that song with you. It's about a father who is very busy in life. He talks about his child being born in the usual way. And he said but he had planes to catch and he had bills to play. He said he learned to walk while I was away. And he goes on in the song and he talks about when the boy turned 10 years old that he wasn't there. He was off somewhere else. But he sent him a baseball glove and a ball. And he said that when they come home, then they'd have time to play. Well, when he came home, the boy said, Father, Dad, teach me to throw a ball. And he said, well, son, you know, I'm just so busy. I just don't have time today. but one of these days I will. There's another thing the song says. The boy, when he first learns to talk, he said, Dad, when I grow up, someday I'm going to be just like you. And in the refrain of the song, it says, someday I'll be just like you. Well, time goes on, and the man grows old, the son grows up, the son marries and moves away. And the father calls him up on the phone, and he says, son, sure would like to see you if it'd be possible. And he said, well, Dad, you know how life is. There's bills to pay, and there's places to go and things to do, and the children have the flu. And he hangs up, but he said, Daddy, I love you, and it's been good talking to you. And maybe someday we'll be able to get together and see each other face to face again, basically is what the song is saying. And then the author of the song, the very last verse, it says this, and as I hung up the phone, it occurred to me, he had grown up just like me. My boy was just like me. The cat's in the cradle. You know, life is going to have its regrets. Don't let your children be one of them. You may be a single mom, and I know that there's a lot of single mothers and single dads. And thank God for those grandfathers and uncles and others that step into that child's life to give them a role model to follow. But don't let your children and your grandchildren be one of life's regrets. Invest your life in them. Love them. Encourage them. And most of all, teach them by example of the love of Jesus Christ. Don't send them to church. Take them to church. Worship with them. Pray with them. Encourage them. This is Pastor Allen. Have a good Father's Day.